Sir Stirling Moss, known as one of the best drivers never to win a Formula One World Championship, sadly passed away on Easter Sunday in 2020. He was known for battling the likes of Enzo Ferrari, Juan Manuel Fangio and Mike Hawthorne, and racing alongside Enzo Ferrari back in the early days of Formula One. Sir Stirling's career started off with motorsport background, but never the funds or the ambition to get into Formula One. At 18 years old, he convinced his dad to buy himself a Mini Cooper, and then a few years later, in 1949, Sir Stirling competed in the Continental Motor Racing Championship. 2 years later, this elevated him to Formula One, where he finished 8th in the 1951 Swiss Grand Prix, which was his first race. A few years later, he won at the British Grand Prix at Aintree, which was the first win for himself and the first win for a British driver in Formula One at the iconic race. Quoted by Stirling as the greatest race that he's done, in 1955 he was racing at the Mille Miglia race in Italy, the 992 public road race, which was the greatest race of his career. He beat the legendary Juan Manuel Fangio over the distance by 32 minutes at the finishing line, elevating him a win and beating the Argentine Formula One world champion. In the next few years in Formula One, he was battling said driver to finish an amazing second in the 1956 season. In 1957, he became the closest of ever. Juan Manuel Fangio retired from the sport, and battling fellow Brit Mike Hawthorne, he moved to the British team Van Hall, where he had a great battle and almost won the World Championship. Unfortunately, this was the closest time Sir Stirling Moss would come to win a Formula One World Championship. In that same year, towards the end of the 1957 season, Mike Hawthorne, his fellow competitor and friend, was found guilty of reversing around the track and was impeded by the stewards. In a tribunal which was held just after that race, Sir Stirling Moss argued on behalf of Mike Hawthorne. This changed the Formula One dynamics and the friendship and rivalry between himself and Mike Hawthorne. A few years later, in 1962, with Sir Stirling Moss gunning for his first World Championship, he was racing at the Goodwood race in Easter Monday. Unfortunately, this would be a career-ending crash for Sir Stirling Moss, as he crashed into a barrier, forcing himself into retirement, which unfortunately ended his racing career. But he was posthumously seen around the Formula One paddock even to shortly this day. He went into commentary after he retired from Formula One, and then in 1980 he competed in the touring cars and the legacy modern British Veterans Touring Car Racing Series. Sir Stirling Moss was an iconic figure around the Mercedes team, did guest races alongside L.Hamilton and other iconic figures around the paddock, and was always a great guy to see for the legacy and the future of Formula One. Sir Stirling Moss has left a massive legacy on the sport. As his British award and knighthood shows, he's a great guy and a great figure, not just in motorsport, but in everything in British and in sport. Sir Stirling Moss will never be forgotten, and Formula One would never be the same without him. Rest in peace, Sir Stirling. To be honest, I can't remember if Canada was cancelled last week. France might be up next, then Austria, then Silverstone. Honestly, there's just so many races going at the moment. But as we currently stand, France, Paul Ricard, and the French Grand Prix in 2020 is on the calendar. It's a weird time for Formula One, as it of course has been for the last few months. We're creeping up on the second winter break, so after Abu Dhabi there was one winter break. If we had another winter break, we're coming up to that. Could we possibly see 3 winter breaks before the season starts up again? Let us know in the comment section below. But anyway, enough of the cancelled races. Let's move on to a little bit more progressive news in Formula One. Of course, the changes for the 2021 season have been postponed until 2022, and one of those changes saw the budget spend cap for the teams rounded up to a nice and friendly, reasonable, what you might have in your pocket, $175 million US. Now, that is a big change. It's the biggest change we've seen in Formula One for 70 years, even though people didn't really spend $175 million US back in 1950. Of course, the bigger teams like Mercedes and Ferrari have to throttle back. It helps Williams and people like that as they can catch up, and Formula One is more friendly. As I say, it's one set amount that Ferrari and Williams will be spending at the same point. As the coronavirus or the COVID-19 pandemic pans out, a lot of teams have put their staff on furlough, including parts and manufacturing. It's a weird time in terms of funds and managing everything back at their bases. The CEO of McLaren, Zak Brown, has called for the FIA to postpone the regulation changes even further back into 2023. But the main thing coming out of the American is that the budget cap of 175 million should be scrapped and lowered indefinitely for the remaining seasons. Now, of course, when this situation blows over, it isn't going to be a simple one-star fix. Formula One and every other sport in the world will be struggling for months and years to come. So that 175 million isn't really going to fly in the way of what everyone was hoping back in 2019, thinking 2021 will be the year that it helps everyone. To push the regulations back even further would give the teams even more time to work on and progress everything for that season. Of course, the odds of having a good and successful 2020 season are slowly slipping away. We're not sure when we're going to get racing again. And 2021 will be a progressive season, but won't be the regulation changes. So hopefully we can hit the ground running in 2022. Pushing the 1 year back would help the sport, as we would have around a season and a half, possibly 2 seasons, to work on and progress the workings of the FIA and of course what they wanted to change back when the regulations were changed back in 2019 for 2 years forward. The spending cap would also help the teams, as they would be able to The spending caps would also help the teams, as they will be able to use this time and in 2021 and 2022 respectively to build up to work to the regulation changes, and of course the money that will be spread out evenly. And again, in this crisis that we're seeing, Formula One can't be seen to be spending loads of money on regulation changes. So of course that was just one word from Zak Brown, the CEO, but other CEOs and other team principals have joined suit. There has been word from Red Bull Racing and Haas and Scuderia Ferrari, who have all joined in with the discussions of the regulation changes. Of course, a few episodes ago, Scuderia Ferrari back in Maranello were struggling with the outbreak and the pandemic and placing their workers in furlough for the next few months. Of course, this has been seen all around the world. Haas have been the newest team here in the UK and also in their European base in Barcelona and their overseas base in North Carolina to put their staff and workers on furlough and to stop production work of Formula One and motorsport parts as of this time going forward. So it is a really strange time for Formula One, and the regulation changes and especially the money should not be thought of at this time. So let me know what you guys think. Firstly, do you think that the regulation changes should be pushed back an additional year to 2023? 175 million isn't that much for Scuderia Ferrari, looking back in 2019. But right now, after this crisis and after the situation we see ourselves in, 175 million US dollars can't really be seen as a low amount of money for an international sport. Max Verstappen, the man who we all thought was a big Formula One eSports gamer, has apparently snubbed the Formula One eSports hashtag not the Grand Prix events, saying that it's unrealistic and nothing to do with Formula One. Now, of course, it's not realistic. We do agree with that. But as a man of eSports pedigree, we thought Max Verstappen would be following suit of Lando Norris and other drivers in this sport. I mean, come on, Max, if we're going to get people like Nico Hülkenberg and Jenson Button to race, why not you? Well, perhaps the tables have turned. He's snubbed the eSports Formula One, the hashtag not the Grand Prix, but he has raced as a wildcard event for Red Bull in the second round of the BP All-Stars Supercar E-Series event. Now, at least Max is doing something in the off-season of Formula One. Of course, a lot of the other drivers have done other eSports events. But instead of talking about that, the tables turn to drivers like Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. What are they doing in the off-season? Now, of course, Formula One has had a massive break. This is the biggest break that we have seen in Formula One for the past 70 years. And as I said at the start, we are approaching being in our third winter break. Our third winter break, guys. Third. Like 1, 2, and then 3. Wow. So what are those drivers doing to fill their time? Well, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel have been at home, been working on a gym, Also, Roman Grosjean as well has been at home just doing some isolation work in the house. Now, of course, you don't have to race on esports events, but keeping up appearances and, of course, keeping up your driving ability and skills is something that we thought all the drivers would want to use. Now, of course, 2 rounds of the Formula One esports series of the Not the Grand Prix events have taken place. Of course, the Bahrain Grand Prix over the Bahrain Grand Prix, and the Australian Grand Prix over the Vietnam Grand Prix, which has seen some great publicity by not just Formula One drivers, but everyone from different other sports. Now, we've seen people like Sir Chris Hoy, the most decorated British cyclist and Porsche Super Cup driver in the event. We've seen Thibaut Courtois. We've seen golf, darts, esports, gamers, everyone from every different discipline. It's been really great to see, and including those Formula One drivers, Charles Leclerc and his brother Arthur, Nico Hülkenberg, Jenson Button, and the likes. And of course, the man who is supposed to be at the front line, even though he didn't race in Bahrain or Vietnam or Australia, is Lando Norris. Now, Max being in this situation is really good for him. Of course, he still keeps his name into motor racing, keeps his hand in, and of course, it's just great to see him on the esports series, as we've seen him do sim racing throughout 2019 alongside people like Lando Norris. But it does turn to raise a question of what about the other drivers? What are they doing? Now, of course, the older drivers like Lewis and Seb don't have to be on esports, and of course, they're not contractually obligated to. But it would be nice to see them do some sort of driving so we can kind of see what their life's like, what they're doing in this isolation period of no Formula One. It turns to the other drivers to think they're just in this for entertainment, or they're entertainers. It's great to see. They love just being on the front line and not just driving. Max is buying into that, which is great to see. We're seeing the entertainment side of Max, and I think it's great. I love esports. I wasn't a big fan, but I'm definitely a fan now. But of course, like what Max said at the start, it's nothing like the real thing. We need to get back to real life Formula One, and of course, that is what we're all here. Leave in the comment section below, guys. Do you like esports, and is it the best way to fill this time of isolation? And out of the current drivers who aren't doing esports at the moment, who would you like to see throw their hat into the ring or throw their steering wheel at the esports race? Let us know, guys. And would you like to be a competitor, and who would you like to go up against in esports? I think if I had my pick, I would love to race Jenson Button. I don't know why, I just really enjoyed watching him in Australia for the Vietnam Grand Prix. It was a great series, and I'm a big fan of Not the Grand Prix in 2020. Now, a story that we've covered a few times on F1 24/7 News in the past few weeks, Formula One is at the forefront to helping the NHS and to helping the World Health Organization to combat the COVID-19 outbreak and the global pandemic. Mercedes have introduced the CPAP, which has been worked on alongside the college in London, and has been aided to the NHS to help in this outbreak. Now, this is being produced at Mercedes' main factory in Brixworth, and since a few weeks ago, since we first mentioned it, they've received over 20,000 orders of the CPAP and aid from Formula One in the pandemic. Now, Project Pitlane, which included Mercedes and many of the other British Formula One teams, using all of the supplies and the manufacturing equipment at their garages, have been aided to the NHS in to help what's happening in the world right now. Now, of course, a lot of the staff are on furlough and the supplies aren't really there. But Mercedes and Project Pitlane is doing the most that they can do to help in this pandemic. The CPAP and the technology ordered by Mercedes, AMG, Petronas and the other teams in Project Pitlane have been really, really resourceful all around the world. From the recent orders from the NHS and the World Health Organization, Formula One is definitely helping in the combat and hopefully the slow of the spread to hopefully the complete success of the beating of this virus that we are seeing right now. It's amazing for Formula One to see that we are helping so much in this situation. We're not just a global sports community, we are helping and we are giving something back to the world. Now again, this is a situation that is ongoing. Mercedes and other teams in Project Pitlane are doing the best that they can do, but of course they are only aiding the NHS and the amazing emergency services and medical provisions around the world to combat the pandemic of COVID-19. We are in awe of Project Pitlane, and we love the work that Mercedes and the other teams in Britain and around the world in Formula One are doing to help the best that they can do. Now, again, lastly, in this F1 24/7 News podcast, because we have mentioned it and because it is linked to Project Pitlane, we would like to extend our congratulations and our gratitude to the NHS and all of the emergency services workers here in the UK. Now, if you're from the UK and if you don't know about it already, we do a clap at 8 p.m. UK time on every single Thursday. Please come and join in if you haven't already. This is a massive gratitude, and we are really thankful to have this in place. We hope everywhere around the world that you are all staying safe, that your emergency services really do know that they are, cared for, and everyone feels like they are doing something useful and beneficial in your said countries. We would like to extend our gratitude to everyone who is helping in this situation, from emergency services to medical provisions. We hope that everyone listening out there is staying safe and healthy, finding the best way that you can throughout the isolation, helping your fellow man as best as you can, and of course staying safe and healthy, ready for the start of the Formula One season and for everything in the world to get back to normality. So that is the end of F1 24/7 News. Thank you very much for listening. We hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy out there. Please leave in the comment section below everything that we've said in this episode about eSports, about Mercedes and Project Pitlane and what they're doing to help the NHS, and of course everything I've mentioned in this video. Feel free to talk about in the comment section below. We hope you can join us throughout the coming weeks for F1 24/7 News, our F1 debate shows on Saturday, F1 Online Decode, and everything we have planned throughout this season. F1 or no F1, we will still go at full beans. Hopefully we can get a season underway. We have no idea, as I've said at the start of this episode, as time of recording, Paul Ricard is on, but the French government have said that it's looking very, very doubtful. Thank you very much for listening, guys, and until next time, stay safe, and we'll see you later.